Our distinguished group of panelists and analysts will discuss, debate, and even challenge some of the basic premises that are important as we look to the future of TV in an informative and engaging panel. I'm going to ask each of the panelists to take a moment, starting with my far right, Ben Bloom, to take a moment, say who they are, where they work, and how that fits into our topic. Ben, if you would, please.
Yeah, thanks, Marty. My name is Ben Bloom. I'm with Akamai, Director of Professional Services for our media division in the Americas. And the way I fit into the future of TV is working with a lot of the major broadcasters, publishers, content producers within the Americas, North America, South America, to help get their content and their applications online, helping them scale, helping them secure those applications, and anticipate their growth and being able to design applications in the way that scale online. And so excited to be part of this panel and hit it from the online perspective.
Very cool. Thank you. And to his left, John Corser from NBC Universal.
John Corser, NBC Universal Cable Productions. I'm a production executive. We work with the producers to get their shows on, we'll say, on the air at the moment, or wherever it's distributed. For us, for me, the industry is changing because our distribution platforms are changing. But for me, we do the shows. We create the content that get out to people.
And a division known as cable productions wasn't something that was even thought of 5 or 10 years ago. So just indicative of the changes going on. To his left, Lindsay Gardner from an interesting startup.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lindsay Gardner. I head content for Layer 3 TV. It's a startup cable company, first new cable company to launch in this country in 10 years. We've got subscribers in Washington, Chicago, Denver, Dallas, and we're signing up subscribers right now, serving them here throughout Southern California.
Okay, and to his left, Gene Munster.
Good morning. I am a founding partner at Loop Ventures, which is a research-driven venture capital firm, and that means that we continue to write research and publish that on the broader themes, everything from streaming to artificial intelligence, augmented reality, and virtual reality. So my perspective here is both on the streaming side and also on the impact of AR and VR.
Okay, and Gene may take first prize for the longest distance traveled to get here today, coming from Minneapolis. Other than perhaps Larry, who's going to speak now, maybe came from the Valley, maybe came from Beijing to get here?
Sure. No, this morning was the Valley, so it wasn't too bad. Larry Namer, these days found the head of Meitan Development Group, which is in China. We do media across all platforms in China, and we basically have been using China now as a way to test new formats of programming and then take them out and sell them around the world. And we have our first big one coming up now, where the format we developed in China we've now sold into India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Dubai, and I think now Brazil. So.
Sounds good, thank you. And I'm Marty Schindler, CEO of the Schindler Perspective. We are a husband and wife consulting team. Our combined credentials include a Big Four professional service firm, top 5 business school, and hands-on experience at Fox, MGM, Industrial Light and Magic, Kodak, and Bank of America. We've worked through the years at almost every point on the horizontal value chain and many of the verticals that intersect with that. Follow me at Marty Schindler. So we've got a lot of topics to discuss today, and we want to save time for Q&A. Q from them, A from you. So we're going to talk about innovation and disruption first. I posted a very smart article on my social media the other day, an op-ed from CNBC. In fact, I labeled it Smart Article of the Week. It was written by the CEO of GMM Nonstick Coatings, a company that makes coatings for pots and pans. But what he said in that article was, no matter where you are in the supply chain, you better innovate like Bezos. So, while the article was not written from the point of view of TV, it still applies today since Amazon is both a competitor and a customer. What does the TV supply chain around the world need to do innovate like Bezos to get to the future? Who wants to hazard that question?
Well, I'll take a first cut at it. Is that the tough part is that Bezos is really driving a lot of this change too, and so not only are they, and when you think of Amazon, think of I've covered Amazon for a long time, and think of a company that is fanatical about taking an idea and going for it and not worrying about profitability. So surprisingly, they see the next stool as content. You would think that it would be something around commerce, or AWS would be their next stool. So one piece that is more recent is Amazon bidding on potential spectrum or doing something with Dish, which just shows you they're approaching this content piece from a lot of different angles. And so when I think about the question about innovate and content around like Bezos, I say, well, what is exactly he doing? And the answer is he wants us in 5 years to think of Amazon as a content play.
Anybody else? Larry?
No, we've mainly in China these days, and the equivalent of Amazon is Alibaba, and we're basically experiencing the same thing. I mean, we're finding they're pretty much all over us on a daily basis, trying to figure out what the content plays are going to be for them, and they're investing heavily in content, particularly stuff that ties commerce and content together. So,
and yet, you think Bezos is going to do that? Could he learn something from you in terms of tying commerce and content? Because tell him a moment about the group in your shoes company.
yeah,
that's a Bezos innovation.
I'm now famous for selling shoes. And one of the shows we have in China, we have a girl who wears great shoes, and whenever you see her, somebody says, "Oh, those are great shoes. Where'd you get them?" She gets them on Sparkle.com. We actually own Sparkle.com, and we actually employ a shoe designer, and we sell shoes, and we actually make more money from selling shoes than we make from licensing the TV show, which a lot of people in the TV business don't like. But we use that model around the world. Our new show is called the Bruce Lee Project, which is a reality show. And within it, we designed it in China, but now we're taking it around the world. And within the show, there's probably, I think there's 8 or 9 products that we've developed and actually have factories manufacturing. So as we roll the show out around the world, we're in the commerce business, and that's where an Alibaba or an Amazon kind of come together, because we don't want to have to deliver the shoes. We want somebody else to deliver them, but we want to be able to motivate people to buy them.
So, Amazon works in lots of countries, but we think of it, we're U.S.-centric in our thinking. Do you see a time here in the U.S. or other territories where Amazon is that they would take a lesson from that? Could that work here easily?
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason. Look, there's no question that that a good entertainment product that has products seamlessly integrated is an effective way of getting messages out and building, demand for certain products. So it literally could work anywhere in the world, I think.
Anybody else got on that before we move on, John?
I mean, everybody talks about the content, and I think that's another piece that you have to look at, because as these, in my opinion, as these platforms, and what I've seen is the producers are getting more and more outrageous to get more and more attention, and I think it helps. Even in China, U.S., you can have a niche market, which is very large, in China for content specifically for China, and then have another one for us. And producers that are creating content can be more innovative to get that content to these places.
I'll invoke the C word for the first time this morning, which is customer. What is often overlooked is that Jeff Bezos is fanatical about, and Steve Jobs was fanatical about the customer. And in our hubris as a small startup company with, I think we're up to 225 employees, everything we do is focused around the customer. It shouldn't be It shouldn't be agonizing to speak to your customer service representative if you're a cable subscriber. Ours are pleasant. They're scriptless, meaning they're trained enough that they just talk and engage. It shouldn't be agony to cancel your subscription to cable. We've got an on-screen guide and a homepage that predicts what our subscribers want to watch. It learns what they watch and like, and 80% of specific program views actually comes through the homepage instead of going through one of our guides. We've revolved the whole company at this point around reducing the friction involved with getting a cable television subscription, keeping a cable TV subscription, deciphering the bill, and watching whether it's live linear, VOD, HD, 4K content.
So you started with a clean slate. Brand new company, new concept, or reapplication or an application of another concept. But where have you put your call centers?
Our call center today is all U.S. based, and it's in Denver. We've got three facilities there: a super head end network operating center with the world's largest high efficiency codec server compression farm. We have a call center, sales center, and corporate offices, all in Denver.
Okay. Do you have something, Ben?
Yeah.
Or not?
So what struck me was that there's these different waves of innovation that are affecting the way folks are consuming content and moving towards these new channels. There's the technical innovation kind of things trying to unify formats, CMAF, ISO standards for VR. There's distribution innovation like we see with Bezos, like we see with Layer 3 TV, where there's different companies playing around with the distribution model, how to package things and attract consumers to that. And then also on the content side, and I think it's a great time to be a consumer because there's a lot of innovation happening, but there's also kind of an explosion in all these different spaces. And so I think because consumers are getting a lot more options, we're seeing a lot of adoption, kind of accelerating that. And so it's definitely benefiting the consumers because there's all these different layers of innovation kind of happening at the same time, all to benefit the consumers in that Bezos kind of customer-centric mindset.
So I want to move on to social media and TV. And social media really has been an innovation. Social media, to put a time frame in perspective, last week or thereabouts was the 10th anniversary of the Facebook IPO. And they'd been in business, 5-7 years before that? You probably know better than I do on that number. But 15 years at most they've been around. So social media has been innovative. But now a lot of the social media apps and applications are starting to look the same. Live broadcasting from established nets and others, news feeds, sports, and other programming are now flowing through Twitter, Facebook, Hulu, Amazon, and YouTube, as well as a range of the second-tier players. Live sports content is arguably the most valuable commodity in broadcast, and Facebook is going to do one Major League Baseball game a week. Last week was the first one. One down, 19 to go. Amazon paid $50 million to stream NFL Thursday night games. And in the content front, for example, all of the Mr. Rogers episodes will stream free in an 18-day marathon on, does anybody know? Twitch. 18-day you wonder if that works, whether that's the target demographic or not, but they're going to find out. A Mr. Rogers marathon. So the question really comes with that as a prep. With these platforms looking very similar, and with many of the broadcasters and cable cos looking similar, as we look to the future, really what will be the differentiating factor?
I think having content that is appropriate for the right audience is going to become more important. Facebook now has a studio where they're producing original content, Facebook original content, and it's going to be formats between 3 and 10 minutes long. That is just kind of in the wheelhouse of like an Instagram user and a Facebook user, and so I think this also plays into VR. I'm getting way ahead of the conversation here, but and how those type of formats are going to engage kind of future generations. And so when I hear all these new players, I wonder, as somebody who's more biased to the tech companies, what traditional media would say about their businesses and how this long format model is going to compete with what seems like an appetite for short form content.
Larry?
Sure. For us, I think the answer is you do all of it. We've been, the new show that we've got coming out now in September is all about fashion weeks around the world. And when we designed the model, we basically look at every single platform there is, the Chinese equivalent of it, because we're doing the show initially in Mandarin. And basically saying, okay, what's the content we're going to feed for Twitch? What's the content we're going to feed for mobile? And stuff like that. And basically, it all kind of assembles at the end of the week. So you have a 1 hour broadcast show at the end of the week. But during the week, you've got these segments that, range anywhere from 3 to 7 minutes. So that, we're looking to do kind of all of it, because we think there's still audiences across the board. We don't think it's either this or that. We think it's all.
Anybody else?
Yeah, these platforms are all these are all meaningful niches. They're all incremental, backed by the powerful brand and spending of Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, others. They'll find their places, but don't overlook the core offerings of our big MVPDs. Now, we integrate Twitter, we integrate Facebook, we integrate YouTube, we integrate the SVOD subscription providers. But nevertheless, our subscribers are watching 8 hours a day of television, just our 300 cable and broadcast and premium channels. The average, Nielsen says the average pay TV household watches 19 and a half different channels each month. Our subscribers are watching 40. There's a huge amount of viewership of MSNBC, of Fox News, of USA, of Showtime, and sometimes it gets lost. Those channels, which are investing billions of dollars in their brands and new content, this is the golden age of television. They get lost amid our zeal to talk about the 2 to 5 minute short form program that Facebook is bringing to market.
Are some of those stats fed into Nielsen or ComScore?
Well,
you've got the
yeah,
data.
Nielsen,
you know exactly what's going on.
We know everything that's going on with. We know what's going on with our subscribers. We know what Nielsen's doing. We have built into our chipset and the set-top box. We're Nielsen compliant, so we know. Therefore, Nielsen knows. Sure.
Okay.
Advertisers know.
Yeah, Marty, I think you touched on something, which is there's a lot of places consumers can go for content, how they discover content, and, the average viewer is still consuming a lot of linear content, but there's also a lot of kind of discovery happening with niche content, social content, and how that ecosystem works, where users are going to find content is really interesting. You brought up Twitch. You might go to Twitch to watch Mr. Rogers or to watch esports. Or if you're watching esports, you might go to Twitch or YouTube or the game publisher site or some other custom application. And so consumers have a lot of choices, and I think it's interesting to watch how consumers discover content and kind of move across these different platforms as we lower the barrier to move around them.
So some of the challenge in what you're saying, people have a lot of choices, is some of the challenge for perhaps some of the niche players in particular, having their programming be found. Mm-hmm. Twitch has an audience, a built-in audience, so if they start popping up ads that says, don't forget, a week from Tuesday, or whatever the day is, don't quote me on that date, please. And I'm not going to watch it most likely, but Mr. Rogers is going to be on. That's a good way to find it, but there's all sorts of other stuff that's out there. How can people really find it? Or make sure the content doesn't get lost, putting it conversely.
I mean, for me, the producers have a great opportunity to produce almost anything now and get it out there. How people find it can't be their concern. They need to get it to a distributor that has been found, to Twitch or someplace else, to a linear place or Snapchat or whatever it is. But the producers have the opportunity to create a whole bunch of stuff
So in your business, though, that counts perhaps as the first run?
Well, that's who you engage with. I mean, you got to get the content is the first piece.
So on the content discovery side, I reluctantly bring out this topic, but artificial intelligence. The reason I'm reluctant is everyone's an artificial intelligence company, but the reality is this is going to have an impact on content discovery. Recently, I went to a presentation from the head of AI at Facebook, and he mentioned that his group is getting pulled into every other Facebook product to try to help with how their news feed is organized and how pictures are organized. And this is not just about what's trending, what content's trending. It's trying to get a better understanding of what you actually are interested in. And so the ability to use AI to improve recommendations, I think, is going to become an important tool for content discovery.
Could it be a tool for content creation? Do you then target the...
That's a fun topic. So quickly, we've given that a lot of thought.
Marty encouraged us to pick fights, so let me be contrarian. Content discovery creates friction, and it's not always consumer friendly. I talked earlier about a fanatical devotion to customers. When we go home, we just want to find something to watch. We don't do content discovery. We learn what you watch, and if someone watches Suits, my favorite show on USA, can't wait for the movie, we don't say, oh, you may be interested in this syndicated rerun of Boston Legal. If someone watches The System, learns that you watch Sean Hannity, it doesn't say you may enjoy Glenn Beck on The Blaze. It reinforces decisions you've already made. Research shows, people want to go home, or even on their portable devices. They don't want to work hard. They just want to find something that addresses their interests. And most of the time, that's something that they watched before in terms of a series or show.
Larry, do you have something before I move on?
Yeah, you don't have to be just finding that audience that is most likely to watch you. One of the things that we do a lot, we experiment with in China, which we actually did here in the U.S. back in the E-days, is look for the people least likely to, or most likely to hate you. And find those and figure out how you drive them in. So I'll give you an example. So you take a show that we have that's on broadcast. We actually build a companion piece that's out in social media where it's basically people tearing apart the show that we've done on broadcast. So you're getting all these people that would never watch the broadcast show because now they're listening to a show. If you remember Talk Soup, the show that was here in early E when I first came out with that, people go, wait, we don't understand. You're going to do a TV show that makes fun of TV shows. And I went, exactly. The ratings of the shows we made fun of went up dramatically because the people love making fun of them and stuff. And we're doing the same thing now. So we're using social media to build this group of people who love to hate us, but they watch us.
All right, moving on here. Security. OTT has become a significant factor in recent years and will continue to be. We saw recently with the WannaCry ransomware that the whole cybersecurity issue continues to be front and center. I saw an interesting stat the other day. 40% of small businesses per Park Associates claim that their greatest concern about using cloud-based software is security. Sony was hacked last year. Pirates of the Caribbean, being released later this week by Disney, was hacked. There's still not a complete story on that as far as I can tell, and it didn't seem to rise up to the same level as the Sony hack, but nevertheless. So where in the future of TV vision does cybersecurity really land? What do CDNs and others really need to keep in mind?
I think the reality is it's a perpetual arms race, in terms of securing cloud applications, being able to have confidence that you're protecting your consumers and giving your consumers the trust that they can be safe within your ecosystem. But as much as it's an arms race, I think that it's more of a process than a solvable problem. I think that savvy companies are building in security into all their processes the way you would if you were a financial institution or something like that. It's just becoming more prevalent because the attack surfaces are becoming broader. Consumer information is a lot more valuable now. And so baking in security into the development of applications and the way things are projected to the consumer is becoming really important. In the technology world, we talk about DevOps, being able to develop something and then operate the system. And I think a new trend is DevSecOps, develop it, secure it, then operate it. And so I think that security just has to be instilled into everything we're doing that's consumer-facing, even B2B, because anything that is of value is a potential for attack. And there's no offline systems anymore. And so it's evolving, and I think the companies that are most successful thwarting attacks or staying in front of potential threats are the ones that are just paranoid and actively pursuing new solutions and trying to be engaged in the race rather than passive consumers.
So is it naive to say that why haven't we learned this already, and why are there continuing stories coming out about it?
Perhaps. I think it changes very quickly, and this is a new space, I think, for just from a technology perspective. I think things that were considered low value before are being able to be exploited as new attack surfaces, and so that's a new trend that historically we haven't had to deal with as a media industry.
So, Larry, the comment that a lot of people make, if you just look at the press, the attacks are coming from the Chinese, the attacks are coming from the Russians, wherever they're coming from. You're in China. How is it within the country itself in terms of hacks?
Well, it's changed dramatically over the last few years, in that you used to have hackers hacked everything. Now they only hack things that are not all Chinese owned, because the Chinese companies mainly have become public companies and stuff, and they have reporting, and they go to the government. They get the government to enforce anti-hacking stuff that's basically going to impact them. When it comes to a U.S. company, they couldn't care less. That's pretty much the way it is there now.
Have you been hacked?
We actually have a different way. We know who the hackers are and we know who the pirates are, and we basically we make deals with them that we're okay if they hack us. We'll actually give them a license as long as they report numbers to us. So we then, because we're all ad supported, so we then turn
So
around.
that's not hacking. That's not hacking. That's licensing your product.
Well, it's how you turn hackers into licensees, But they're going to do it. We call them up and say, we have a show on Saturday night at 10 o'clock. Are you going to steal it? And they went, yeah, of course. We go, we'll tell our friends in the government. They said, well, we'll tell our friends in the government.
So it all works. Everybody's happy. Round up the usual. Is this round up the usual suspects?
For the advertisers, we go in and say, by the way, we got a bonus of 10 million people watched the show last week. And we give them a big kiss, and they're thrilled. So as long as you can get the data that you could, help monetize, it works for us anyway.
All right, I'm going to move on. Something I call two sides to every story, except there's usually three or four. Variety had a headline recently that read, quote, "Can pay TV save itself from extinction? Cable's worst ever first quarter comes as Hulu skinny bundle threatens more upheaval." Couple of data points I want to add to that. The U.S. cable, satellite, and telco services lost 762,000 video subs in Q1 after losing more than 2 million in 2016. ESPN's John Skipper at the recent Upfront commented that they've lost subscribers, and I say in parentheses here, supposedly 9 million in the past few years at ESPN. But then he went on to say, but they made up for it in OTT offerings. Therefore, it was a zero-sum game. Pardon the pun on that one. Digital TV research reports that in Western Europe, it will cross 100 million pay TV customers in June this year and climb to 106 million by 2022, a 6% increase. Then, on the other side of the coin, again, last Sunday, the LA Times in the front page above the fold, I still get the print subscriber to the LA Times, wrote that the bundle is not dead, and users attempting to subscribe to a range of OTT offerings end up spending more than if they bought the cable bundle in the first place. Ben's shaking his head. Lindsay's definitely shaking his head. So what's going to differentiate countries and regions as we move to the future? What will it take? Will it take a service like Layer 3 or others to, some people are going to get bundles, some people are just going to get OTT offerings, or where are we?
Well, we believe in the bundle. Our target are the 65 to 75% of the nation's households who still see a lot of value, or heavy television viewers who see value in spending $75 or more a month for a robust pay TV subscription. We've always had cord nevers. We just never really had a name for them until recently. And what's happened, there was always a stubborn 10 to 15% of U.S. households that didn't see value in a pay TV subscription. And then there's probably another 10, and so now we have a name for them, cord nevers. There's an additional 10% or so that didn't have any choice. They either had to just go with the over-the-air stations, or spending, again, $75 or more on a pay TV subscription. And they didn't like it, but they paid the $75. Now, because there are options with these skinny bundles in particular, and SVOD services like Netflix and Amazon and Hulu, they have other choices. They don't have to be locked in to something that they just don't see the value of and they're doing grudgingly. So those are your cord shavers who are moving into these other packages. They're moving away from the robust pay TV ecosystem. And in all candor, maybe they shouldn't have been there in the first place. They wouldn't have been there if they had choices. But what we're finding in our research, and I think it's validated by the Consumer Press and the Wall Street Journal, these cord nevers, these cord shavers, two things happen. One, they are slowly discovering that once you pick up, you have your Netflix, your HBO Go, your CBS All Access, pretty soon you're getting up to that sort of point of indifference, $75, $80 price point a month. The other phenomenon we're finding as millennials hit 30 years old or so, as they get married, as they have children, they start to look more like us in this room. They want Nickelodeon, they want Disney, they want Disney Junior, Disney Kids, and they come back into the pay TV ecosystem. So yes, there is a business for Hulu, for YouTube, for all of these skinny bundle services. Many of them are operating at the low margin end of the business. If we could figure out how to make money on a $20, $30, or $40 bundle, we would. We haven't figured that out yet. But the real magic and the margin and the shareholder value in our ecosystem still remains, in our judgment, the robust pay TV package, well administered and well served.
I'm curious. Let's do a quick poll. How many people here are cord nevers? Nobody. How many people still subscribe to cable? Okay. How many people have one or more, let's say two or more OTT offerings that they get? And that's in addition to cable. That means you're getting Netflix on top of your cable subscription or some such. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Marty, is that sure the net subscribers may be down, but the ARPU per customer is up for most of the traditional broadcaster or cable providers. And the folks that are consuming those OTT services are typically the folks also paying for cable. And so it's a lot of additions on top of kind of the traditional viewership metrics that we're used to. I don't think there's any shrinking of audiences. I think people are consuming more content. They're just getting it from more different places and spreading the revenue out amongst different channels. I think as a net, the industry is definitely growing. It's just some of those core metrics are a little strange as consumer behavior changes.
So if you're a brand, okay, and some of the numbers are down, the 18 to 49 group, for example, which is always labeled as the most coveted, was down to 28% from 36% 5 years ago. Now, that's in terms of prime time viewing. So if you're a brand, if you are one of the device manufacturers, if you're one of the carriers, if you are a consumer product of any kind, from soft drinks to razor blades to whatever it be, how do those brands find people if some of the millennials are not going out to buy any of this? How do those people get out there?
It's just classic ad tech at that point is the long tail that we're talking about here. Is there's tools that they can go and build those audiences, and so it's not super exciting to talk about, but I think that there are definitely ways that these brands can try to tap into those people who are finding the content in new ways.
By pop-up ads on OTT, by
Yeah, even by what essentially happens is the content owners or the content distributors will put their content up on some sort of an ad network, and then brands can go and show ads against that content through the ad network.
Okay. Platform planning. You mentioned that you work on a number of different platforms. You're all planning the content for a number of platforms, where it's laptop, TV, tablet, or smartphone. You got to be thinking about all of those, and downstream revenue. People are more omnichannel these days versus not just watching everything on a 5.5 or 5.7 screen. So how much planning is done up front in developing the content and getting it produced to make sure that you can meet the needs and the image quality and all the rest of those subsequent runs?
Sure. I mean, the answer is a lot, at least for us. I mean, knowing that we're going to create content that goes across all these platforms. I mean, we even get to the point where we'll do final edit on some of our content. We'll actually do it on an iPhone. We'll look at it on an iPhone. So we shoot differently. We'll shoot, when we're shooting for a small screen, we'll shoot a lot of close-ups, not a lot of long shots, not a lot of people in the shot. So it's definitely affected the way we approach the production.
Is it all done at once up front, or because they're not still released in some form of sequential order?
We're in a fortunate position in that I sometimes feel bad for my friends at the studios and stuff, because you have a lot of silos. So you have somebody who creates the broadcast show, then it goes to somebody who does the web, then somebody who does the mobile, and somebody who does the social and stuff like that. You never quite get, a solid, coherent experience, because we don't really have all that legacy stuff to deal with. We can design stuff across all the platforms, so we consider it. So when we shoot, we might shoot extra scenes, knowing that this is going to go in the mobile show, and this other scene is going to go in the broadcast show.
Yeah, and as a producer, for over the 20 years I've been a producer, from my standpoint, we targeted it for the platform only when we knew where it was going to be distributed. So mostly advertisers care if it's mobile or whatever, but actual producers of like dramatic shows, they don't care where. They want their show to look the way their show looks, regardless of where it goes. So they don't design for the device, unless it may be the difference between a movie and a television. But that's
so
the only.
So is that talking to the silo concept that Larry's discussing?
Probably.
So you hand off a show to you don't have to give confidential information. I'm not asking confidential, but generically, you produce, first run is on one of the cable nets like USA or Bravo at NBC.
We work with the producers to create a show that they want to show, and that's what we do.
And then subsequent windows?
It's wherever it goes. Same show.
Okay, no other...
I mean, in my years, I've not
Okay.
changed it in order to be shown on a littler device or a bigger device, except for when we went to a big screen. Went from a small screen to a big screen. Then we remastered it so it's can be shown larger, not smaller.
Similar to Game of Thrones has been shown on IMAX screens, for example. That would definitely require some
Cleanup.
formatting and cleanup and up-resing and probably a lot of work. Probably worth the money given what they've done at the box office on that. How about today, literally today or figuratively today, planning for VR and AR segments of the shows that you're doing? Gene?
Big topic in my world is just this next wave, the way we're going to engage in machines. And part of it is VR through content, part of it's AR. Last week I went to the Cannes Film Festival, and the French are really great with creativity. They're not so great with technology, with all due respect. They are not embracing the concept of VR. You go to the Tribeca Film Festival, and VR is a big deal. It's not going to replace a 2-hour in front of a big screen, but what you're essentially going to see is content, whether it's TV shows or theaters, have kind of this off content or supplementary content that's going to be VR based. It could be in the lobby of a theater. It could be something at home that you watch. It could be for promotion. It could be, it's typically going to be about one scene of a TV show or a movie and really diving into that scene versus necessarily telling an entire story. But there needs to be a lot of progress on the hardware side. We love talking about chicken and egg problems. Is it content or hardware which is holding us back? This is not a chicken and egg problem. This is a hardware problem. Is that the hardware needs to make it so people aren't sick. It's not heavy when they put the headset on, and those problems are probably going to take 5 years to solve. And the way we see this is that you're going to see a progression of the supplementary content to becoming longer format, and there'll be new storytellers and new ways to tell stories, not just in 360, but choose your own adventure as you can move in 6 degrees within these environments. And so we're really excited about VR over the next 30 years. The big screens are not going to come down in the next 30 years. There'll be still people who want to go out, have dinner, and find ways to entertain and be entertained in community.
Larry?
Yeah, I mean, we pretty much see it the same way. Right now, we use VR. It's totally supplementary to everything else for, a host of reasons that, mainly we can't figure out how you monetize it when you do it in long form. But we also haven't found much stuff that the audience is interested in seeing in long form. We think storytelling will come around. People will come up with new ways to do it. I probably get a phone call a week now from somebody who's playing around on the hardware side of VR, and they're going, could you do something for us to use as demoware? And I go, let me guess, you'd like a concert. They go, yeah, a concert would be great. And I go, no, I don't do that. And, when you think about it, you go to a concert, the group is in front of you, you want to watch the group. I don't care about my neighbor picking his nose. I don't need to look at my shoes. I don't need to know what's on the ceiling. There just isn't a lot of conceptual development that's been done so far to create interesting long form. So we just use it as a way to, to add something a little different. Sometimes it's a scene or something like that, which helps drive people into our main shows.
It's an enhancement, not a thing in itself. It's
Yeah.
a marketing.
Yeah, right now it is.
Gene commented the big screens aren't coming down, and on that point, we'll give you a cheap, shameless plug. 1 o'clock today, I've got a Future of Film panel. Gene is going to be a part of that. We've got people from Barco Escape, Fox Studios, Osterhout Design Group, Fathom Events, and Mediamation, which is a motion-based. So we're going to cover a wide range of topics related from the big giant screen, if you will, down to VR. So cheap, shameless plug. All right, speaking of plugs, 4K or UHD, you can't have a discussion on the future of TV without thinking about that a little bit. I spent yesterday at a conference called Display Week. It was really very interesting seeing what's coming up in displays, from giant displays to what LG had wallpaper display hanging on the wall, and it was wallpaper thin. It was OLED. It looked really good, down to the micro displays that are in front of your eyes with AR, and a lot of other uses those micro displays are going to have. But for the moment, when it comes to TV, 4K, UHD, slow to take off somewhat. TV's up-res today. Is there a future for that? Is it a chicken and egg concept again? And lastly, what's going to happen in 2 years or next year when in Pyeongchang is the Winter Olympics in Korea? And 2 years after that, in Tokyo, the Summer Olympics, undoubtedly Korea and Japan, two of the most technologically astute countries in the world when it comes to broadband and content. 4K, 8K, let's hear what you got to say. I've thrown a lot of fodder out there just now.
Yeah,
Well,
there's a lot of cases.
I'll speak for my friends at NBC first. NBC had a 4K feed for the last Olympics. They just couldn't get any MVPDs to take them up on it. And so I have no doubt that 2018, 2020, there will be even more. There will be more 4K, and more of the industry will be ready for it. I talk about 4K every day. And every meeting I have with any of our programmers, we're talking about 4K. We're about to launch our second full-time 4K network. We are working with our friends, our partners at Fox, Viacom, Scripps, AMC, all of whom are providing us 4K and investing in it. This year, more than half of the displays in this country that are sold will be 4K. Every one of we deliver 4K to every room in the house. We're the only cable company that does any 4K. Comcast, I think they'll have some 4K fourth quarter this year, minimal. This is one of those areas where the biggest companies will follow consumers. When consumers start demanding more 4K, when they start viewing more and more Netflix on their smart TVs in 4K, and more viewership is coming away from the major programming networks, then the major networks and programming companies will invest more in it. Fox at considerable expense, is producing several high-profile sports events, including the upcoming U.S. Open, which will carry live golf in 4K. They're getting ahead of the market, and AMC is doing some of the same stuff. Viacom, we're going to be carrying a MMA event from Madison Square Garden, a Bellator event live in 4K. So it means something to our subscribers that we're changing behavior. We're changing behavior from them. We've got 22,000 video-on-demand assets in our video-on-demand library. We have VOD assets that are in the top 10. Number one in the whole country, by the way, is This Is Us, NBC series. It's not in 4K. But number two is a 4K series from BBC America. It's extraordinary how much consumers want 4K, and they're going to act on it when they're going to act on it and demand it.
How much of the content is originated or acquired in 4K, and how much of it is just converted to 4K?
Well, Fox is producing sports in 4K. Planet Earth 2, the successor, the David Attenborough Peabody Award-winning documentary that's on BBC America, originates in 4K. Giada from Food Network is originated in 4K. I think everything we're doing so far in 4K originates. They're creating masters. They're creating 4K files and MES files from the masters, or in the case of the live stuff at Madison Square Garden, Spike, which is televising Bellator, they're bringing in 4K cameras into Madison Square Garden next month.
But the dramatic series, or even TV, is it acquired on a 4K, like area 4K, or is it 2K and then edited and then converted to 4K?
No, there's enough data in the original production that you're not up-resing anything. The original masters have the data and the bits in them to facilitate.
But some of that
4K.
question needs to go back to you, John. You asked him, does it originate in 4K? You're out there as a producer. What are you shooting?
In my years of doing this, when 4K has been here, how many years is that? 5 years. I would say very little of it is acquired in 4K, unless there's some purpose to showing it at the end.
So you're not even using
distributors demanding it.
You're not even using a 6K feature that, like the Alexa camera has, or some of the other.
Of course we do, but there needs to be a demand for it, and if there isn't some requirement, then we don't want to have all that data, and it takes too much time to deal with it. So it doesn't make a difference to the end consumer. We don't do it.
Yeah, I don't think.
I mean, I don't do it.
There's not a huge consumer demand for 4K. I think there's interest in it. Devices are catching up. There's more 4K screens out in people's homes. All of us have 4K screens in our pockets right
We're going
now.
to be doing it.
But sports isn't there yet. It's very hard to produce live 4K content, and there's very few sports leagues or arenas that are able to do that. That's going to start changing with the Olympics, in the winter coming up in Tokyo. And so I think once sports catches up, that's when consumers really tip over. We saw that with 1080p. It's going to be the same with 4K.
So
Right.
the Olympics could be something that induces the consumer to take the 2, 3, 4, 5 HD TVs, and a couple of which may still be 720 versus 1080, in their home and say, you know what, it still works to 720, but we're going to move that one out the door, move a 1080 from room A to room B to room C, and then, in the living room, put in a 4K. And
Well-
prices are coming down on those.
Well,
So is that going to be the inducement, do you think?
As networks require it, like, you get your specs from the network of what you have to deliver. As they require the 4K, producers will start acquiring in 4K. Until that happens, producers don't need to do it, and it's costly. It's a big price jump to acquire and edit and finish in 4K, especially if you're doing visual effects and everything else. It's just a lot of data.
So Ben keeps shaking his head on that. Can the infrastructure handle it from an
Yeah,
Akamai point of view?
Yeah, the infrastructure can. There's definitely a lot of focus now on the technical innovation, being able to compress more into the pipes we have. But it is still costly, and I think there's a practical aspect to 4K content, which is our consumers seeing enough value to be able to absorb those additional costs of production and workflow.
By the way, I just checked here, Amazon 55-inch 4K Samsung, $800.
Good job. Yeah, this is
Amazing.
this is deja vu all over again. If this
I'll
group,
get you to a
if
quote,
you had been
David.
here 10 years ago for this panel, we would have been having the same argument about SD versus HD. And my great friend Todd Shane back there, we were having these debates inside Fox 10 years ago, where our colleagues, they didn't want to put the money into HD gear to shoot a Lakers game, and they challenged us to get money for it. They said, get money for it, get the cable operators to pay us extra, and we'll show the Lakers game in HD. And we said, Randy, that's not how it works. And eventually, they, led by David Hill and others, everybody's HD. How many of you watch, other than watching antenna TV or Cozy or something, which are the multicasts, how many of us watch SD anymore? Eventually, and it'll likely be the end of the decade.
My dad
But it's 4K's coming, everybody.
Well, your 10-year comment put a shiver down my spine, because I have been doing this panel at this hour called Future of TV probably for 5 or 6 years now, maybe 7. Larry's been a big part of that many, many, many times. Ben a few times, and John. Actually, Gene's been a couple of times too. Yeah, we had those conversations. How are we going to get over that installed base of TVs until it became mandatory, the digital cutover?
But when does the stop? You go 4K, then 8K, then 12K, then 20K, and your broadcasters or your networks have to start converting all their equipment every single time.
At the exhibit hall at Display Week yesterday, there was
That's
a lot
creative
more
destruction.
8K stuff out there. More so than you've seen before. At NAB back in April, you saw more 8K than before. It's hard to say where it's going to go. Let's go on. A couple more questions, and we'll go into Q&A from the audience. We really are a wired society talking about infrastructure, at least here in North America, cable broadband, and significantly less DSL. But there's really a trend towards cell phone-only homes. There's 13 or 14% of U.S. households are cell phone only. There have been a number of satellite launches in the last couple of years, including one that SpaceX put up last week, a communication satellite for Inmarsat. I don't know if I pronounced that okay. Elon Musk announced about 2 weeks ago that in 2019, he's going to launch 4,425 super fast internet satellites. So that's going to change a lot of stuff. We've had the Spectrum auctions recently. Dish has bought a lot. Verizon is in the process of buying Straight Path to enable them to compete on 5G. Comcast and Charter are joining forces, a topic you and I talked about last week, Gene, to market their mobile services with an eye towards 5G. What's 5G going to make to the future of TV, either from a consumer point of view or from a producer and distributor point of view? Go ahead.
From a consumer standpoint, it's going to be as bigger of a jump than from 3G to LTE, and we haven't seen the exact specs on it, so we don't know. But the thing that gets talked about in the venture community is that this could be exponential speeds. Think of being able to download a standard def movie in instead of 10 minutes, 30 seconds, kind of a. So what that means is that from a content stand, you can now use this in your home. And so I think the idea of getting your internet through your cable company, that kind of fades away. I'm a technology person, a futurist, and probably an alarmist, and so it's probably going to take longer than a few years for that transition to happen, but I think the way we get our internet's going to change because of 5G in our homes.
People will tether their phones if there's good coverage. Or there'll be a
device.
5G type of modem built into my laptop, so I can.
Or they'll sell AT&T or Verizon will sell you a little box that goes in your home that essentially is a router.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a push to deploy 5G around the Olympics, probably not for the winter, but in Tokyo. And I think we're just going to become reliant on mobile broadband. I think it becomes seamless to the end user at that point. The quality of service is going to increase, the throughput's going to improve, and consumers aren't going to have to worry about whether they're on Wi-Fi or mobile broadband anymore. It's just going to be completely transparent. So if anything, that'll drive consumption as folks just get more comfortable having an always-on connection.
So go ahead, John. Never mind.
No, listen, it depends on how much they charge you for that data.
That's true.
The data, then people will not do it. So if you're paying for data in multiple places.
Yeah, it's true.
Data is becoming a commodity. I mean, the price, it's super competitive out there. The zero billing concept that you've been talking about, Ben, data, people are just not paying attention to it. You don't pay attention to it at home on wired, or people don't.
Yeah, folks consume data like ideal gases consume space. If you give folks data, they will consume it. However much broadband you have in your home, you will find a way to saturate that, or your kids will find a way to saturate that. And so I think the consumer model and the commercial models, there's just going to be a lot of playing around about how to support the infrastructure development, those high infrastructure costs to launch satellites or deploy 5G nodes, versus the consumer demand for it and how those costs are balanced out. I think the focus on zero-rated billing, particularly in developed countries, is really interesting as a way to subsidize infrastructure, but also get content to folks that may not be able to afford it, either from an infrastructure or device perspective. How that plays in the developed world is interesting too. I think there's a lot of interesting things happening about the way that those costs are kind of spread out into the market.
So we're going to start seeing devices in the next year or so. I mean, it's got to be twofold: 5G being built into devices of all kinds, not just our mobile phones, and then the infrastructure on the poles, but the poles are already there.
Right, and I think developing nations is an area that I think is kind of the forefront of where that's headed, which is countries deploying new infrastructure, skipping over wired infrastructure. Right. It's messy deploying fiber and maintaining copper networks. Yeah. They're going straight over the air, and that's why there's such a focus on spectrum, and it's why those developing countries are focusing on mobile and the use of wireless technologies like 5G or 4G now.
Last item. The next wave was the last phrase of the title of this session. I added it, the last digital Hollywood, in deference to the prior passing of a man called Alvin Toffler, who wrote a book called The Third Wave. Someone who inspired me in a lot of ways. He inspired Steve Case's book of the same title. We actually wrote a business plan for Mr. Toffler about 10, 12 years ago. So as we look forward, and Mr. Toffler was a great futurist, with the components of the next wave, and without making this sound like a naive comment, it was always mobile first. That's been the mantra for a long time. Last week at Google I/O, the CEO of Google said, now we're moving from mobile first to AI first. You started to touch on that earlier, Gene. Where do you see AI really fitting in beyond the recommendation engines and a couple of things you mentioned earlier? And I'm sure the others have a couple of points to make.
It's a little bit different than the topic of TV, but just quickly is that AI is impacting us in terms of how our news feeds are and recommendations. That's things that are happening today. The next step of AI is going to be just being able to tell our phone to do a complex task and have it put together. So, for example, instead of saying call someone, you'll say send a text of my favorite picture from the Grand Canyon to Dad, and so that's kind of the next phase. Ultimately, AI starts taking away jobs and starts changing industries. Accounting is one that's an obvious. There's some legal things that can get, even my old job as a financial analyst will be replaced by AI. And so I don't know, I think you should feel comfortable, the people in the content space. And one thing AI doesn't do well is creativity. Some people think it will, but we don't think so. And it definitely doesn't do apathy well. And so those are kind of secure places in this next wave.
Anybody else? Should we go to Q&A? Let's go to David, because David's been patiently waiting. Go ahead, David.
I'm not usually known to be patient, but thank you, Marty. On the 4K question, you all were talking and laid out a lot of the questions about what the issues are at the production distribution end. But the question I had, you talked about how it's not much different than the HD and SD in terms of comparisons. Even with HD and SD, if you had a 42-inch set was smaller, you didn't really see a visibility difference. But the point I want to get your views on is, rather than spending the cost on the equipment, on the extra data to deal with, on the types, et cetera, you have now really excellent technologies for upscaling the HD content to 4K or near 4K in the sets. And so the sets are selling really well, and people are happy with that. The question is, how much do you really need to do on the other side, or is it something that Layer 3 and the other cable MSOs can sell more at higher prices? The studios can sell more Ultra 4K discs, and there now is a market for those. But from the viewer's perspective, is it really going to mean that much? Especially if it's going to create headaches for production and distribution.
Well, a lot of the consumer experience depends on your medium. Blu-ray, UHD, 4K discs, you have physical media, all the data's there. Unfortunately, you can spend $1,000 or $800 on a 4K display, and if you're a Comcast subscriber, or Spectrum subscriber, or DirecTV subscriber, just the compression schemes that they use, they squeeze too much out of the data stream and of a signal that gets to them in 1080p. And on a 4K display with fast processing power, it's not gonna. DirecTV and Dish and others do not deliver pictures that make the best use of the processing power in your television. So increasingly, I think consumers will get more educated about who's compressing the most, who's providing the most data to them. In some cases, they'll be, if they care about this, they'll have to be stuck getting physical media. Netflix is going to have an increasing amount of 4K, but they do adaptive bitrate profiles. So depending on contention and heavy usage of the broadband pipe, you could be watching Hemlock or something else in 4K, and you're not seeing a 4K picture. There's a lot in the trucking and the transport of television pictures that influences quite a bit the quality of the picture in the home, irrespective of how much you spend on your television set.
Yeah, more than resolution, I think dynamic range, high dynamic range content, and surround sound are much more impactful for consumers now. Those are probably more likely to get adopted, and consumers will demand that because it's much more tangible difference side by side. High dynamic range content versus standard dynamic range, or surround sound versus non-surround sound. I think those are more tangible than 4K versus 1080p.
Yeah, except HDR, there isn't a format yet. There isn't a
Right.
standard yet. So for all, people like us, we love to talk about HDR on panels, but that's even, in some ways, that's even farther away than 4K because the industry hasn't coalesced yet.
Right.
Well, Dolby and Vizio, two companies in particular, are very much trying to push HDR forward right now. We'll see. Other questions? Go ahead.
So I have a question for the entire panel, which is, we started to touch briefly on the technology, and instead of focusing on the content creation, production side, let's talk about the end delivery, maybe venue. And also, Larry, you know that consumption of content in Asia is majorly the small screen. So that goes back to something that I don't think I've heard much about, which is OTT delivery. We know that's an infrastructure play, which we also touched on. But in a world where content is now across borders, and so you can't rely on the standard that we have here, so content that we want to travel to foreign markets, and as you rightly described, IPTV situations are going on, or direct to consumers in environments like Africa and India, where there's no standard, there's no regulatory oversight, and in essence, there's no quality control, and really there isn't any here because we have buffering. So that's a problem that's universal for content, for delivery, for infrastructure, and it also relates to the end revenue across the board for everybody. So what are your thoughts on what's the solution, where's that headed, what's the outlook? Because it's not about the production of the content, it's not about the capacity of broadband, it's more about the streaming path. So what are the solutions for that? And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's an area that's maturing a lot. I think online distribution is trying to catch up to TV. TV, there's no startup time, there's no rebuffering, instant high bit rate. Well, there's no multi-bit rate. You get your full resolution right out of the gate. Television's had 80, 90 years to mature and become broadcast capable. The technology's caught up, the operations caught up, the standards have caught up so that it's a very consistent technical environment to operate a high reliability system. Online is catching up. There's no standardization right now, just even in terms of how you measure quality, much less how you manage quality. So there's a lot of innovation around that. I think there's a lot of technical innovation in the market to try to solve those problems. And then there is a move towards standardization with things like CMAF, ISO standards for VR that are going to help drive some of that. But right now, it's a lot like TV in the 30s and 40s when it would go offline at the end of the night so that they could make sure that the tubes are replaced and everything's running again. It's not quite that bad because we're catching up a lot sooner. But I think there's a maturation that's happening, and it's just it's creating that standardization that allows us to operate the online ecosystem in a way that's broadcast-like. So we're catching up, but it's not quite there yet.
Big job.
Yeah. We talk about 5 nines a lot within Akamai in the sense of how do we create a 5 9, 6 9 reliable system similar to what we can get over the air or over satellite. It's a major technical challenge that we're trying to hit in a couple different ways.
Time for one more question. Lady right here.
So at the recent Upfronts, the addressable ad market, it was obviously addressed, especially in the area of cord cutters and cord nevers and their experience with being forced to watch television ads. And Turner made, the big announcement about how they had reduced their ad units and are working to try to increase the quality of ad measurement and ad targeting. What are your thoughts on that in this era of, potentially a rise in branded content, or even going back to the olden days of television where it was sponsored by this company or sponsored by that company?
Larry?
Sure. It's one of the reasons I went to China, is because we have the opportunity to do a lot of that stuff. And most of, just about every show that we design is heavy on product integration, but not just product placement, but product into the story, and stuff which works incredibly well. If you remember from Entourage, they had this tequila that it was in one of the characters represented this tequila, and that company ended up selling to Diageo for about $175 million. So you can build the value of brands. So we look at it very different because we don't have shareholders, and we're not in the public markets and stuff. So we can do a lot of crazy stuff. So we look at it, we go, quite honestly, like with the shoes and the other stuff, I don't care if you pay me a license fee. I don't care if I get it from a sponsor. I don't care if I have to sell shoes to get the money. One way or another, we're using our media to generate revenue, and we really don't care about traditional forms.
I think that ties in with the comment I made earlier about how are brands going to find people, or how are people going to know about brands. I think there's just going to be a reallocation of some of that income. Well, thank you, everybody. Join me in giving the panel a great hand for a good job today. All right.
Building
Everybody survived.
with a couple of your
Thank you,
colleagues.
sir.